You should be leaving church lighter than when you came in, especially if you've actually dropped your burdens at the foot of the cross. Church is the place where you go to be forgiven rather than to receive homework.
Hey, if you're alive, there's something you need relief from, and we'll help you find it. Let's talk about it with David Zahl on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
We're so glad you're here. We understand that taking time out of a busy day and offering it to people like us is a major gift, and we consider it so. I'm Steve, in case you were wondering, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter's here. Matthew managed to become a professional writer, despite his severe handicap of a happy childhood. He is our executive producer. Our producer, Jinx, is in the little glass booth. I once asked Jinx how many employees work at his company, and he said about half of them. And our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker. We are now in what John considers shorts season, which runs from early summer through late spring. And Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life, even in the hot Florida summer. George keeps his beard because there is no off-season for manliness. And Kathy Wyatt is the soft, feminine side of the program. Kathy says to take care of your hip flexors. A hip flexor is like a regular flexor, but it wears dark sunglasses and listens to bands that nobody ever heard of.
Okay.
Okay. We got a great guest today, and one of our favorite people. I'll give you the address for Mockingbird. And you got to go to that every day. That has something in it that makes a difference in my life. And David has done that with what he writes and in his friendship. He's the founder and director of Mockingbird Ministries. He's the editor-in-chief of the Mockingbird blog, co-host of the Mockingcast and Brothers Zahl podcast. And he's written for Christianity Today and the Washington Post. No, I'm not going to say it. He also serves on the staff of Christ Episcopal Church in Virginia. His latest book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is titled Relief. The Urgency of Grace for a Worn-Out World. I was so glad to get this book. Man, I am so tired of trying to make this grace thing work that it's driving me nuts. I'm forgiven, I know that, but I have to keep saying it over and over and over again, and it gets tiresome. I know that Jesus loves me when nobody else will, but I have to find people who keep telling me that, and they're getting harder to find. And so I need some relief from all of this, and I expect that David is going to provide it in this broadcast. David, thanks for being with us. This is a great book. And I don't know if I've read anything like this before. I found myself in every chapter, and those who are listening or watching will find the same thing. Is this existential? Were you just tired? Can you hear me?
Now I can. You went out for 10 seconds there.
Oh, it was probably the most sterling 10 seconds that have ever been
I
aired.
pushed the button because he
on
was
this
talking bad things about you.
Oh, sorry about that.
All right, back to the question. Is this I mean, do you need relief? Or does this just come naturally for you and you just do it?
No. I mean, I wrote the book I needed to read. I think if you're not, in some sense, like interested on a visceral level in the stuff that you're writing, it's not going to come across with much energy or authenticity. But yeah, Steve. I absolutely understand the pressure cooker of the modern world and the pressure cooker of the church, and just what it feels like to be alive in 2025. I felt like I am crying uncle. I need relief. I need relief from just about everything. And so I just wrote a catalog of all the ways in which I need relief and how I think the grace of God, has something to say.
So these are your 10 greatest sins. And this is kind of a confessional that you put. Actually, we really do need relief. You know, somebody was telling me just yesterday how tired they were all the time. And and I said, it's just because you're old. I mean, you got to face those things. You can't do what you used to do. I know, by hearsay, of course. And my friend laughed. But it's not just oldness. We live in a very, very high, active, crazy world. And I just want it to stop so I can get off. And you suggest that the gospel has something to do with this. I thought it just had to do with liturgy and worship and stuff like that.
No, siree. I think that experience of things getting faster and pressure ramping up, acceleration is how I talk about it in the book. I think it's universal, and I don't. It doesn't matter. It's not just people who are in the church, or just people who are in business, or just young people, or just older folks. Like the sense that there's more and more demand, that the pressure is amping up, feels pretty universal. And so I thought to myself, what is the closest emotional approximation of the gospel and the sort of pressure being removed? And, whenever I've experienced or really internalized or heard the message of God's grace, I experience pressure being removed. It might be the pressure of condemnation, or the pressure of guilt or regret. It might be the pressure of, just needing to keep up with everything. The pressure to produce is a very modern pressure. And so, I thought if Christians only have, 5 seconds at the microphone, and we're not talking about the relief that the grace of God can offer, then we've missed our shot. Because everything else, there's so much more to our faith. But if you're not the engine of the whole thing is the fact that God loves, God forgives, God redeems, in spite of who you are. And so I wanted to foreground that with everything I got, but also trace it how it maybe plays out in various contemporary settings.
Too often at church, it's just an additional list of things that you either didn't do and should do, or a list of things you need to begin to pray about. And if you walk away from the church burdened down more than when you came, something's not working right. True?
Absolutely. I feel you should be leaving church lighter than when you came in, especially if you've actually dropped your burdens at the foot of the cross. That's the invitation we receive, that church is the place where you go to be forgiven, and rather than to receive homework. And we receive homework everywhere we go. And so to have this one time of the week that's reserved for things like absolution and mercy and and grace, I think, is just countercultural in the extreme. And the tragic irony is that sometimes those are places where you just hear a spiritual form of the law, or a new kind of pressure
That's
to
true.
be the best kind of Christian or something like that. And that to me saddens me, because we've got such a amazing gift, with a capital G to offer the world.
I'm gonna steal from you, and I'll give you credit the first time. After that, it's mine. But a new word, I love it. A new word for the gospel is relief. What a cool! The implications of that are almost astounding. In fact, when I picked up the book and read the title, I thought, "Whoa, that's it." It's relief, and if you're not feeling relief, take a couple of aspirin, drink water, and then call me in the morning. Or you could always go to Jesus. You're forgiven, you're loved, and He's got this. You got to get this book. It's a new way of saying some old things, but a very profound and wise way of saying those things. The name of the book, and you'll rise up and call me blessed for having recommended it to you. The Big Relief. Whew. The urgency of grace for a worn-out world. Speaking of which, this is hard work. And we've been doing it for all of 10 minutes. So we're going to rest, get relief, and come back. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're talking to one of our favorite people, David Zahl, and his latest book is called The Big Relief, The Urgency of Grace for a War-Torn World.
David, you start off the book sort of qualifying, in a sense, or I guess characterizing, in addition to almost substituting the word gift for grace. You give some descriptive qualities of that. Can you go through some of those? Incongruity.
Sure. Yeah, if you write a book about grace and you just and relief, you gotta do what you can to describe or to define what it is you're talking about. And so I looked at the New Testament, also the work of a theologian named John Barclay, who talked about the way that Paul, his word for grace and his word for gift were synonymous or the same. And so what was it about the gift of God that Paul was talking about that was different from the way that we usually give gifts? And so he like points out 6 of these perfections of grace, he calls them. I only highlight 3 of them. One of them is it's incongruous. The way that God gives is incongruous, meaning like it's out of proportion with the recipient. So there's no kind of, it's not, the size and magnitude and value of the gift is not indexed to some worth in the person who's receiving it. And I thought incongruous is a good word. And another one is prior. God gives not in response to our gifts, but before, that God is the initiator. God knocks Paul off his horse, that this is not the order of the gift exchange, is always God coming first. And I thought that's a really important one. The third one is superabundant, which is the scale of the gift. So there's incongruous, prior, and then superabundant. And so the way God gives is sort of maximal and not holding anything back. And grace is such a familiar and wonderful word, but the task of the writer, at least the task as I see it in this book, was to shed not some new light, but some fresh light, maybe polish it a little bit, give us a new way into the things we've always heard about. And so these are some words that have helped me reconceive of grace in a more powerful and immediate way.
That's a relief.
David, I personally looked at the table of contents to start with and noticed immediately the chapter on guilt, which is one of my personal favorite places to always go. I'm an expert on guilt, and it was very interesting to me in this chapter when you were talking about guilt. You actually zeroed in on three ways, or three. You gave three examples of ways that people deal with guilt, and I wondered if you would just touch on the. You talked about escape and deflection and denial. Can you briefly summarize a little bit of that? Because I think I know how to do all three of those really well.
No, gosh, well, nothing gets us dancing more than guilt, does it? I mean,
I know.
To escape guilt is it can be as simple as sort of ejecting ourselves from a relationship where someone's making us feel guilty, or it can be just running in the opposite direction of anything or anyone that makes you feel guilty. I think this is pretty. I am on intimate terms with this too, Kathy. But you have, there's also ways in which we fight guilt. We sort of say, I shouldn't have to feel guilty, and so we do that by kind of deflecting and to say, well, look at those other people. They're much more guilty than I am. That's a social media response to guilt, isn't it? We say, eyes over there. Avert your eyes to the truly guilty person. And in some ways, we try to mitigate guilt in that way. And denial is just to say, who are you to make me feel guilty? I mean, guilt is a social construct, and you've got nothing. I think how many times have I heard from a friend, a well-meaning friend, who tells me you've got nothing to feel guilty about. And of course, I know myself. I know that I do have something to feel guilty about. My son got in trouble. We got a call from his middle school yesterday because he kicked another kid on the bus. And I just watched his own his response to the phone call was not to say, I did a terrible thing. His response was to say, the other kid wasn't hurt. It was all in fun. There's nothing to feel guilty about, basically. I really didn't do anything wrong. And it's like, son,
he needed kicking.
he needed kicking, yeah. And then they're like, well, unfortunately, there's a camera on that bus, and we can see the video, and it doesn't look like you're just having fun. And so he finally gets to the point of saying, okay, you're right, I made some bad choices. What do I need to do? And the truth is, he's not going to be allowed to ride the bus for a few days. But to watch the way that guilt, he did all of them. He tried to escape it by not telling me about it until I get the call on Monday, though it happened on a Friday. He tries to say there's nothing to feel guilty about. And then he also then tries to mitigate it by saying the other kid didn't actually had it coming or something like that.
Did you make him go back and apologize?
Well, I just asked him if he did need to apologize. And so I don't quite know. He needed to suffer a consequence in this respect, because I know my son, he's 14. He kind of thinks he's invincible, and I was sort of happy that he got the call, frankly. And it's this rather than something much worse. But I also know that God's grace and I actually use an example in the book of when you're in the hot seat, when you're in the principal's office. What is that when guilt has you nailed to the wall? What form does grace take? And a lot of times it can take the form of atonement. This person over here yes, you did wrong, but this person over here has sort of covered it. Or it can take the form of sort of an unearned gift in the middle of that. I don't know what it is. Their job, I don't think, was to show grace. Theirs was a consequence. So for me, as a husband, as a father, if I see sufficient remorse, who knows? Maybe I'll take him out for ice cream.
Cool. I had a principal once who offered grace. This teacher sent me to him, and that was a scary thing because we knew of students who had gone into his office and never came out. and I I got in there, and this is true. And he said to me, "You don't like that teacher very much." And I thought, how am I going to answer that? And then I finally said, "No, not much." And he said, "Me neither." Wow. And he said, "Don't ever say I said that. I'm going to keep you here for another half hour, and we'll have a good time, and then I'll let you go on back to the class and limp as you walk into the classroom." That's
What
when
an experience of grace.
Yeah, that's when I learned about Jesus. When they told me, I know him. He's a principal of a grammar school in the mountains of North Carolina. Guys, it was a relief. And this book will be that to you. The big relief. The urgency of grace for a worn-out world. You got to get this. You got to read it for yourself. And then get a group of people in a small group and discuss it and underline it. We'll return. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're hanging out with David Zahl. You can keep up with David, and you need to go to these places at mbird.com and on X at Mockingbird, MIN. Kathy, you had something else to say
I did. I
about
just
guilt.
wanted to finish up. I want to encourage everybody really to buy the book. And obviously, I asked the questions about guilt. But my favorite thing in this chapter, David, is the last couple sentences. And so I'm just going to read it. Dolly Parton once said that, quote, "Grief is love with no place to go," end quote. If that's true, then despair is guilt with no place to go. The Christian faith gives guilt a destination. The foot of the cross is our guilt depository. You can leave your burden there, confident that full atonement has been made. Court is adjourned for good.
Dang. That's
Man,
pretty
oh
good.
man. I was like, okay.
Who wrote that?
Relieving.
Yeah, who wrote it? Dolly Parton.
Yeah, you pull Dolly in there. You're hitting
I was
checking
at
all the boxes.
Dollywood last week, by
Yes.
the way, and I went to the Dixie Stampede.
Uh-huh.
That's a fun place.
Oh.
We used to have one here in Orlando.
And Dolly was there, and we talked a long time.
Caught up, I'm sure. All right, I'm going to try to steer this back on. So something that jumped out to me, David, was you're kind of just reading my mail here. When you talk about deserving and in the danger and the burden of feeling like we deserve things, and you talk specifically that we often feel like we deserve something not just for our hard work, but for our hardships. I was like, oh, shoot, I'm going to have to think about this one. Where does that mindset of deserving eventually take us?
Gosh, it takes us, I think it takes us nowhere good. I mean, if you're a person who thinks that the only good things in life you're going to get are the things that you've earned, well, then what happens when you suffer some terrible setback, or you simply don't have enough talent or energy or time to do what you feel like you need to do to earn good things? So if you feel like you earn things through hardships, well, then you all of a sudden compete with other people to be the person who's had the worst time of life. And, we kind of see this kind of competitive victimhood thing in our culture today, but that's a lot of what's going on. We think that the blessing or happiness is reserved for those who earn it, and they've either earned it through their accomplishments or through their pain. And in either case, though, you're setting a person up for deep heartache and loneliness and despair, because what constitutes enough? In this situation. You turn a person in on themselves or against other people. If I see you as if we're just life is nothing but a competition for a finite amount of resources, well then aren't we just to do whatever we can to get ahead? Or my neighbors are not people to be loved; they're people to be outperformed. And I don't think any of us want to live in that world. But a world ruled by God's grace undercuts that at its like at the beginning, at this idea that life is a matter of deserving, because you didn't deserve to be born. There are plenty of people that we might say deserve not to be born, especially. And so everything's a gift. It's all grace.
Yeah.
Oh man, people are always saying, "I hope there's justice," and I want to say, I don't think so. You get justice, man, you dead. You don't want justice. You want grace. No. You want relief. In the thing on favor, I was hit. I'm always looking for a place. I never have felt accepted. Still struggle with that a lot. And so I do things to get favor, to be accepted, to have a place. Can you fix me?
Well, I have a chapter in there called as favor is a form of, we as a youth minister, when I was a youth minister, we used to talk about grace as unmerited favor. And of course, that's going to preach very loudly to insecure high school kids, because who doesn't want to fit in, who doesn't want to belong? But of course, you grow up and it turns out there's all sorts of rejection in store. In fact, there's an editorial this week by David Brooks about how the current generation is the most rejected generation of all time because it's harder and harder to get jobs and colleges and stuff like that. So people have heard no a lot. And so if you're a person who've only ever heard no and God is saying yes, well, I think that's an important thing to get across. I think that that's actually of life-saving importance. It may be a different angle than the guilt, atonement, or the forgiveness angle and debt and things like that. But gosh, who of us isn't looking to belong or to have some favor and to heal the wounds of rejection? That's what I think grace does.
And the law causes us to do bad things to get favor.
Oh my gosh.
That's what Lewis was talking about in the inner circle or the inner ring. We do that all the time. Oh, David, this is so good I can hardly stand it. You guys got to get this book. Man, and read it once a year. You'd be a nicer person than you are right now. It's called The Big Relief, The Urgency of Grace for a Worn-Out World. If you don't feel like you need relief, you don't ever feel worn out, you never feel on the outside or guilty or afraid or lonely, then you don't need this book. Not because you aren't any of those things, but because you're dead. We'll come back. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for spending time with us here. By the way, have you subscribed to the weekly Key Life email? It would be such a relief if you did. So while you're thinking about it, no, don't do it now. Wait until the program is over, dummy. Go after the program is over to keylife.org/subscribe.
David, in the book, you have a chapter that speaks to productivity, and my ears immediately perk up, whether it's kind of this inborn Protestant work ethic or kind of the German efficiency, and it's I love productivity, but at the same time, a lot of times it's like productivity's like a jockey just whipping my rear end, just kind of keep going, you're like, ah. So you talk in there about productivity debt. What is that, and what do we need to know about it?
Oh, well, I feel the same way. That's why I wrote this chapter, to be honest, because I have that I'm being whipped by productivity myself. A productivity debt. This is Oliver Berkman is a writer I admire who tweeted one time saying to people, it's just a reminder that you don't wake up every morning with a productivity debt somehow in the red, and that by the end of the day you can hopefully do enough stuff, check enough things off your to-do list to get back into the
Oh,
get back into the
boy,
black.
that's ring. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, to me. I heard that and I thought, oh my gosh, that's I got a lot to say, and that speaks to me deeply as a person who's wanting to justify myself by works of the law. And so, yeah, that chapter I found, especially raising younger kids right now. I've got two teenagers and then a younger kid too, and they're not really allowed to do any extracurriculars that don't sort of aren't training them for something or developing something. Things aren't just fun, like outside of youth group, basically. But that's the only place they go for non-performative, non-developmental fun. And so, I mean, there's still, soccer's still fun if you like soccer, but it's all with this, you're on a ladder. And so I find that ethos has just infected the way we think about ourselves. And maybe it's always been there, if the New Testament is accurate. But we have a hard time conceiving of our self-worth outside of what our tasks, our accomplishments, our achievements, the things we do every day, what we produce. And so, into this world of you are what you produce, nothing more, nothing less, you have Jesus telling the parable of the workers in the vineyard and
yeah.
offensively seeming to value people according to their presence or their need, rather than how long they've been at the vineyard producing, etc. So grace is a word of, I think that to those who are struggling under the law or the pressure to produce, grace is a word of immense freedom, and also the freedom to play. There's play is not just frivolous kids games. Play is anything you undertake for the sake of delight in doing it. That's like the category here. It's what would you do if you weren't afraid? If you really believed that nothing that needs to be done hasn't already been done by Christ. What would you do? What kind of gifts that God has given you would you exercise for the sake of those people? If you weren't scared of missing out on something or not getting to black on your productivity debt. So it's a very key place, I think, where people feel pressure and the need for relief. I know personally, I'm just limping to the finish line of summer so that I can feel like I don't have to put in 60 hours a week.
Oh, man.
And isn't the whole productivity thing is not just a thing that happens like with work, or if your kids, for like what you were talking about with your kids and the things that they go to, sports things and that kind of thing. It happens in the church too. Productivity in the church, is like all the things that we feel like we need to do. Well, I do this, but I probably should do this also. And then somebody else comes and says, well, yeah, but there are only 3 people now that are doing this, and you should really do this as well. I mean, I know some people in my, in my church now that I think, I don't know how it's a good thing you're retired, because I don't know how you would function, because they're just under the weight of, of that in the church as well.
Oh, 100%.
By the way, David, just to give you some hope, the Bible teaches that if you die while having teenagers, you go right to heaven. They don't even ask about Jesus. They just say, you poor dear, you come on in.
What if you take one with you?
It's a push.
Oh, God.
Hang in there, David. You'll see what I mean shortly.
It's a trial, I tell you what.
I brought you into this world. I'll take you out.
Make another one just like it.
That's right.
Yeah, I can do others.
David, you talked about beyond just your point of conversion, that there was a point where you really had a real understanding of the concept of grace or whatever. Can you talk a little more about that?
Sure. I tell this story in the conclusion to the book because it's really important for me not to just explain intellectually what I and biblically what's going on, but to connect it to the actual inner workings of my own heart, hoping that that will resonate out. So when I was 16, I got really into the music of the Beach Boys, and they had just been releasing some stuff that no one had ever heard before, and I'd found out that Brian Wilson, the guy who wrote all the famous Beach Boys songs, God Only Knows, Good Vibrations, that he had a very terrible, rough go of it from the late 60s basically through to the mid 80s. And I found out that he was about to reemerge. I was a junior in high school. He was about to reemerge from this cocoon where it was drug abuse that had put him there, but also a lot of mental illness, and he'd been exploited by this therapist. There's movies about it and everything. At the time, there weren't. And so I hear there's a documentary coming out that's these new interviews with Brian Wilson after years of silence and hardship. And so I seek it out, and my local video store, and I press play, and I watch this video, and Brian is damaged. Just there's only one way to say it. Like, he doesn't look at the camera. He speaks out of one side of his mouth. He seems really uncomfortable. And finally, towards the end of the documentary, they talk about the experience with this terrible therapist. And he says in this slurred speech, he's like, I had a terrible time, and I said, I went to the keyboard and said, my soul aches so much. And I just sat down on the piano and I just started playing the song. And then he starts playing the song. And it's Love and Mercy is What You Need Tonight. It's this beautiful song. All of a sudden you can hear his gorgeous voice singing. And at a moment, he was not only singing about the big relief, what is love plus mercy, if not grace, but he was embodying it. You believed it because there was no reason why it had to exist. This was not in any sense like the result of Brian trying hard or working hard or having any kind of background in any of this stuff. It was just a gift, and it was flowing through him in all of his weakness, and it was blessing everyone around him. And I thought, gosh, there's something true that I'm witnessing. And he's singing also about love and mercy. We don't need more consequences, more punishment. We need love and mercy, because there's so much pain in the world. And so that got me hooked, you guys.
David, what a great way to end our conversation. You are a gift to so many and to us. Thank you for this book. Thank you for this hour. Interrupted in our laughter. We were talking about Jink's comment. We were talking about teenagers, and you go right to heaven if you die when you got them. And Jinx, I'm not even sure you're saved, Jinx.
And
We'll see.
Jinx said, take one with you.
There's been days.
This was a great hour and a great reminder. I wasn't kidding when if you are a teacher of grace, and that's what I am, and I've been that for 100 years, more than most of you have been alive. I talk about grace and mercy and forgiveness all the time, and pretty soon those words become cliche words. It's not that they're not true, it's just they've been said so often, they lose their power. But what a gift to us that David would use the word relief. That works. That really does work, and I'm going to use it a lot because it is a relief. It's grace, and there are theological concepts and biblical concepts that go along with it. But actually, it's relieving to know that you don't ever have to feel guilty again. Ever. And that God's not angry at you because it's covered. It's a relief to know that somebody is in charge of this mess and you don't have to be. It's a relief to know if you spent your whole life trying to get accepted, and I have, to know that you're accepted. You don't have to do anything to be accepted. You're just acceptable because it's all been done for you. That's the gospel. That's grace. That's mercy. But a better word is it's just plain relief. What a great hour. Great guest. You got a high level to accomplish next. Who's going to be your next week?
Actually, because we already did this particular interview, I am pleased to say that next week will be a really, really good one. Next week, we're going to have Adam Young with us, and his book is titled Make Sense of Your Story, Why Engaging Your Past with Kindness Changes Everything. It was a
Relieving interview.
great interview.
It really was. You don't want to miss that. You know, he's Dan Allender wrote the introduction to his book, and Dan's our friend. And he had written a book on To Tell the Truth, which is that God speaks in our biographies. So you got to know your story. And the guest next week goes a step further and says, go back and visit often, but be kind and be merciful. You don't want to miss that. We'll do it next week, same time, same place. You join us, same time, same place. And between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. And that gives you a wide, wide berth.